It began like a routine bit of sports media news, but the deeper you look, the more this story feels like a power struggle that's been building for years. Molly Qerim's exit from ESPN wasn't the clean, corporate goodbye the network wanted you to believe. It was abrupt, messy, and, as one insider put it, a brutal emergency exit. And at the center of it all stands Stephen A. Smith, ESPN's $20 million man, furious that one of his closest collaborators had dared to walk away, and worse, that she walked straight into the arms of a rival. Publicly, ESPN tried to spin the narrative. Executives claimed Molly simply wanted to explore other opportunities, her interests no longer aligned with the network's future. But if this were just business, why did Stephen A. go on his SiriusXM show and suddenly start talking about humility, leverage, and how everyone has a boss? He never mentioned Molly by name, but the subtext was glaring. Who else had just left the network after failed contract negotiations? Who else wanted a bigger platform? Who else refused to play by the rules that kept Stephen A. untouchable? It was Molly, and everyone knew it. Behind the scenes, the story was even more explosive. Molly, after nearly a decade of corralling egos on First Take, had grown tired of being the sidekick in someone else's empire. NBC Sports saw an opportunity and pounced, offering not just a chair on a debate show but real power. Executive producer credits, cross-platform projects, creative control over her own programming. Things ESPN flat-out refused to give her. When news of NBC's interest began to leak, insiders suspected she must already have a deal lined up. They were right. By the time ESPN thought they had months to craft a graceful farewell, Molly had already pulled the trigger. Within 24 hours, she was gone, leaving Stephen A. to break the news live on air, his voice cracking as he tried to stay composed. His phrasing said it all: that's her story to tell. Translation: he knew the real reason, and it wasn't the sanitized version corporate PR wanted fans to believe. Her farewell post on Instagram was polite, almost sterile, but it left out one glaring omission: she never mentioned Stephen A. by name. After 10 years side by side, she thanked the fans and the First Take family, but not him. Fans noticed. Commentators noticed. And Stephen A. definitely noticed. Days later, his monologues about knowing your worth and not overplaying your hand carried a sharp edge, as if he were trying to warn others in the industry not to follow Molly's lead. But the irony was impossible to ignore. For years, Stephen A. had strong-armed ESPN into paying him record-breaking salaries, openly bragging about defining his own value. When he did it, it was leverage. When Molly did it, suddenly it was ego. That double standard exposes everything. ESPN has a long history of undervaluing women in its ranks. Jameel Hill, Michelle Beadle, Carrie Champion, all carried shows, all drew ratings, and all left under strained circumstances. Now Molly joins the list, and her departure comes with an added sting. She didn't just leave ESPN. She walked into NBC with a 7-figure deal tied to performance bonuses, digital expansion, and Olympic coverage. NBC gave her the keys to grow her brand beyond just moderating debates. They didn't just hire a host. They made an investment in a rival franchise. And that's what rattles Stephen A. most of all. Because for the first time in years, his dominance over ESPN's morning programming is being challenged not from within, but from outside. The abrupt nature of her exit makes the tension even clearer. If Molly had left on good terms, ESPN would have staged a farewell episode, leaned into the ratings boost, and let her go out with fanfare. Instead, she vanished overnight. That kind of emergency exit screams of behind-the-scenes conflict. One analyst put it bluntly: you don't walk off set mid-season unless something big just went down. Maybe Stephen A. was part of her frustration. After all, their on-screen chemistry often masked a deeper tension. Molly cutting Stephen A. off when his rants went too long, stepping in to keep argument from spiraling, constantly managing personalities that ESPN handed him as co-stars. Over time, that steady moderating role began to feel less like a partnership and more like unpaid emotional labor. When NBC came calling with promises of creative freedom, why would she stay in his shadow? For Stephen A., the NBC deal wasn't just competition. It was humiliation. He prides himself on being the fixer, the one who helps others secure contracts. He brags about being the power broker at ESPN. Yet here was Molly, breaking free without his blessing, signing with a rival, and gaining the kind of executive influence he himself still doesn't have over First Take. Sources even claim he exploded privately when he heard the details, furious that she'd secured an executive producer title, something ESPN has never trusted him with. No wonder his monologues began to sound like veiled threats. "You don't get to define your own value," he said on air, when in truth, that's exactly what Molly had just done. NBC, meanwhile, wasted no time capitalizing on the optics. They rolled out a press release framing Molly as one of the most trusted voices in sports television, a veteran with the credibility to anchor their programming and the vision to build something new. They weren't just poaching a host. They were making a statement. ESPN, in its arrogance, thought Molly was replaceable. NBC saw her as foundational. And when First Take tried to move forward with rotating guest moderators, the cracks became obvious. Without Molly's steady hand, the debates dragged, the chemistry faltered, and fans suddenly realized how much she had held the show together. For years, she had been criticized for interrupting. Now, viewers saw that without her, there was nothing keeping Stephen A's dominance in check. The rivalry is only beginning. NBC has hinted that Molly's new project will air head-to-head against First Take, setting up a daily ratings war that pits the former teammates directly against each other. It's poetic. Stephen A., the undisputed king of ESPN mornings, now staring across the battlefield at the very co-host who kept his show afloat for a decade. And this time, she isn't just the moderator. She's the architect. The fallout is bigger than one contract. It's a shift in sports media itself. For too long, networks have treated moderators and supporting voices, especially women, as interchangeable. Molly's NBC deal shatters that mold, proving that there is power, leverage, and audience loyalty in those roles. Her departure cracks the myth of Stephen A's untouchability. And that's why he can't let it go. Every time he insists on humility, every time he talks about bosses, every time he reminds the world that not everyone is Stephen A. Smith, it only underscores the truth. Molly's independence threatens him in a way no debate ever did. Because the real story here isn't about money. It's about freedom. Stephen A. is locked into a massive contract, the face of a network, the centerpiece of Disney's sports empire, but also bound by its rules. Molly just walked away and wrote her own terms. She proved that sometimes the boldest, most dangerous move you can make is to leave the table entirely. And in doing so, she might have sparked the biggest shift in sports television since First Take first hit the air.